Yo, what's up, Foolies? It's your boy Othree. Welcome back to Platicas. This is Platica number 26. I'm here with my guest, Johnny. I'm going to pass it over to him so he could introduce himself.
Gracias, Othree. So my name is Johnny Carlos Ramirez. In many kind of community spaces around family, they know me as Johnny Rocket Can't Stop It. I'm also an ethnic studies educator, so folks might know me as Profe Johnny or Dr. Johnny.
For the rest of the interview, I'm going to refer to Johnny as Johnny Rocket because that's how I met him,
Right.
right? A lot of people, like he mentioned, they know him by so many names.
Mhm.
Professor, that's dope. I feel like that's special. So we'll talk about how that title came to be, but Johnny Rocket is the way I'm gonna refer to Johnny the rest of the interview. That way fools don't be like, who the fuck is these fool talking about? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah,
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 you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Well, to begin every plática, Johnny, I like to ask my guests about where their family's from. I like to hear them talk about their roots.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, brother. So, first of all, I'm very, honored to be here, to be in this podcast space with you, O3. I don't believe in coincidence. I only believe that we come in like each other's journey because ultimately it fits like a bigger purpose, right?
Mhm.
Like stuff is orchestrated, it just doesn't happen, right? And our connection going way back to the Pico Center and our hip hop work and just kind of growing and developing, like working in community, right? Um, but what I think about my roots, you know, um, I guess, and I could preface this that earlier today I was doing a training with these after school youth workers in this after school program in Hacienda La Puente Unified School District. And we were talking about like, kind of like, what is that like important role of acknowledgement? How do you understand your roots so that you can acknowledge like your ancestors and the folks that you kind of bring with you, just in your presence, right? Just how you show up. We're almost kind of like a walking story. So for me, my roots are um I think are kind of, interesting when I think about our comunidad, when I think of the Chicano Latino community, just because of the demographic shifts and stuff. I think in a lot of our comunidades, like being first generation, depending on what part of LA or what region you are, being first generation with immigrant parents, there's a large demographic that holds that background. But for me, I'm third generation. And if I follow what third generation Mexican American or Chicano would be, is that I'm third generation of being US born. So if I go back, my grandparents on my dad's side, Arturo Santos Ramirez Jr., his mom was my nana, Maria de la Luz Perez, was born in the second ward of El Paso, Texas. And she was born in 1924, and she has passed on and stuff. But yeah, she was being raised in her, during her childhood and stuff, during the 30s, during the Great Depression and into the 40s, was like, somewhat in our educational system at that time. And I will say that, because, again, my background is in Chicano studies and doing a lot of that history, that it was very rough for our community and our gente at that time to be Mexican American or even be where you were in the Southwest when it was still part of Mexico, and then post the U.S. Mexican War after, the 1880s or into the 1890s, your family's been there, but now suddenly it's the U.S. And now you're kind of getting the culture shock of like the culture, of US culture and whiteness and all that happening. And then what are you going to do, you know, um, with your roots, with your ancestral roots? So being third generation, I say all that to just be like, it's a distinct experience being here in the United States. My great grandparents, their roots from talking to my nana and looking at a few family archival documents like birth certificates and stuff. On my nana's side, her mom was from Juarez, from Mexico, the northern part of Mexico. I don't know exactly what like her profession was and stuff, but I remember her being a child. She had a little apartment off of a Rampart and Temple up the block from the OG Tommies in
Mm.
LA. So when I
Yeah.
was just a little chavalito, I already was on game with the Tommies and everything. Walking with my nana and her mom, my grandma Rosa, we'd walk down, and she only spoke to me in Spanish. Would only watch Chava de Ocho, like all that. So like as a kid, it was a trip because my cultural identity and that sense of being raza was kind of like, through my great grandma. and a little bit through my nana as well. Um, but so yeah, on my dad's side, the roots were like in El Paso and in Juarez. But on my mom's side, my grandma Mary Carlos and my grandpa Joe Carlos, my grandpa's parents were from Sinaloa, Mexico, and they have that black and white picture of his parents and their birth certificate and stuff too. So, being third generation, I say all that because being third generation US born, to even have that connection
Mm.
is very distinct because I work in community with third generation, fourth generation, and even fifth generation. And it's rough because by that time there's such of a cultural disconnect. There's so much of a culturation, aka assimilation, that occurs that it's still very hard for, you know, for our gente, or that I would call still raza, but as fourth, third, fourth, and fifth generation, them having a connection to their culture because of kind of like them not having a mastery of Spanish, them, kind of being disconnected from some cultural traditions. Maybe in their home, there isn't an altar, there's no ofrenda, just those kind of things, right? The daily kind of like, comida mexicana, where maybe every other week you might have tamales, pozole, whatever, like little by little, then it's only special occasions, it's only the holidays. And then years and generation goes on. Now you've got to go to Cardenas, or you got to go to Superior, because now you're buying it. You're not even really making it anymore, right? Like the great grandkids, right? Like little by little, unfortunately, what US society will do will they say that you get acculturated, but really is assimilate you into mainstream America. And that is code talk for whiteness, ultimately. And I think a lot of my naming it is also filling the vibes of the post-election too, because of seeing the Latino vote as well. So for me, being third generation, it put me in a situation where growing up as a kid, my parents, my mom and dad, were told that to not speak Spanish, to assimilate into, US culture, and in that pathway you're going to find success.
Mm.
So growing up, hearing Spanish and everything, it was almost like spoken so that when they didn't want us as kids to hear what was going on or to know what was going on, they spoke in Spanish. The ironic thing is now, to have some of the best jobs that create opportunity is to be bilingual, right? Is to like do that. And no, I think if you do a little bit of your history homework, shout outs to Dr. Rudy Acuña's book, his second book, called Anything But Mexican. He does a good job of just talking about, like, I think these days our gente, especially here in SoCal, are so invested and ingrained, cultura, taco trucks, gente, speaking Spanish all the time with it. But there was a time where those food trucks were called roach coaches, and our gente were straight up, racially, slurred and called wetbacks. And like, not that that doesn't happen today, but there was a time where that was very overt. And I know there's still some areas like in Orange County, like there's areas here in Riverside in the Inland Empire that still do that. But I'm saying it was even that much, the hostile racial climate for a gente during the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and 70s were rough. And hence, probably why the movement was so strong in the late 60s and 70s too. The pushback to declare, I'm proud to be Mexican American. I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of my heritage, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm third generation. And a lot of my cultural identity, I think my background was found through Chicano studies. So that was my journey when I was a youngster. I got put on by some community college and university activists that are part of a group called MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano Chicana de Aztlán. And this was like kind of during the 90s, and there was a lot of racist policies that were cracking. And, growing up like in the neighborhood and, being a school push out, I had got pushed out of school in the ninth grade, and I was just kind of going through it. And these college students came and spoke to our continuation school program. It was this intervention program I was in, and just hyped us up. Come to our conference, come check this out. And I remember the homie had like a mini truck, and this conference was at Cal State Fullerton, and I was in the Inland Empire by this time. And I remember leaning in his little mini truck. We all laid down, me and the two other homies, we laid down, and we're on the freeway, just bouncing for like an hour to get over there to campus. But I'll never forget, we walk on campus and we go into this auditorium classroom, like that's like the auditorium with the stage. And it was packed, like 500, students that look like me, that talk like me, homies dressed in Pendletons, all creased up, talking politics, talking history, talking about el movimiento. Like our call is to go into higher education, get that knowledge and information, but then come back in our community and build. And that's at all levels: business, education, psychology, health, law, medical school. It's whatever you want to study, but then come back and come in your community and build, Because I think at that time too, in the 90s, we're talking about the gente that got some of the early doors into higher ed in the 70s and 80s. But a lot of them, once they got their positions and got careers, they left the hood.
Mm,
They moved on,
yeah.
and sometimes you can't blame them. I mean, no judgment. Like, I get it. It's like you want to raise a family where there's resource. You want to give your children a better life. I think that's a lot of our gente in our narrative. But then what happens to those communities where, again, they like, until we develop, until we invest in them, until we like kind of build, then our communities are going to always kind of be under resourced and underserved. So,
Hey, Johnny, I've always known that you were with the your business,
yeah.
right? Other community members hyped you up. I never got to be a part of one of your workshops. Never got the opportunity to be while you presented and talked like this. So to me, I'm in shock. I'm in awe because I've learned so much in the past, whatever, 10 minutes
Mhm.
about it's almost like a refresher too of the Chicano studies and
Mhm.
identity. And you covered so many topics in your answer. And I'm in I'm in awe because it is true. It is I'm first generation.
Mhm.
Parents, I could trace it immediately. The Voladas still
Mhm.
talk fluent Spanish,
Mhm.
right? But I'm curious how my generations in the future are gonna be. That is an interesting, super interesting thought that I have de vez en cuando, like once in a while. Like, well, what happens 4 generations from now? Are
Mm.
they gonna still be on some like, on some solidarity things, or are they gonna move on because they figured something else out? I don't know, but
Mhm.
I at least want to play a part in helping my future generations by having platicas like this,
Yeah.
being involved in spaces like
Mhm.
in your classrooms or in talks
Mhm.
that you have and other community folks that I'm going to invite into the podcast to have similar platicas.
Mhm.
Before we get deep into the college stuff and
Mhm.
your journey to become a professor. Let's take it back to the very beginning. You grew up what part of the
Yeah.
state?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, so I was born in Bolin. They call it Bolin, Baldwin Park, California, in the
Okay.
San Gabriel Valle. For folks that might not know, that's about 25 miles east of Los Angeles. So if you jump on the 10 East and go like you're going towards San Bernardino, when you get halfway, right before Pomona, there's this area that's called the San Gabriel Valle. And yeah, I was born in Baldwin Park, California. I was born to two teenage parents, my mom and dad, my mom, Marianne, and my dad, rest in peace, Arturo Santos Ramirez Jr., the second, I believe. And yeah, they were like, during the 70s, they were cholos and cholas in love. They were from the neighborhood, and today in my storytelling, workshop that I was sharing, I talk about like my mom having me at 15 years old. She was a ninth grader, and my dad was 18. He had just was like getting ready to graduate high school. And they were teen parents, and I think they unfortunately struggled in homes where there was alcoholism, violence and stuff. My nana, my dad's mom, was a migrant farm worker, and then she worked in costura. She was a seamstress and worked in Catalina in downtown LA, before her kids started to have health problems like my dad. And she had to stop working to take care of them. They had like kidney disease and stuff. So he had already had his health issues. And my mom, unfortunately, her dad, my grandpa Joe, was a migrant farm worker from Modesto that went to Azusa and started picking lettuce and everything. And just had a hard life as well and started drinking at a very young age and was unfortunately abusive like family. She was at a family of six. And by the time that my mom was 15, you know, um, I guess she just wanted a better life. She was ready to go, and they found each other. I always think about like in youth work, that trauma bonding, like these two
Yeah.
young people that got hella struggles, but they find love in one another, right? They find each other to then build something that they really at their core really wanted was like a family, you know? So yeah, they got together. Unfortunately, my pops with that kidney disease stuff, they had me at 18. They had my brother when my dad was 20, and then they had my younger sister when he turned 23. But unfortunately, the kidney disease started to they don't have like the technology that we have now. My dad was getting services from the LA County Hospital, and we know the stories and the history of just, there was areas of the hospital that had cucaracha, our gente would die there, right? So I always wonder what was the quality of medical care that he really got. But all that to say that, yeah, like, he had health issues all his life, and then he passed. So, I think the big part of my story was losing my father at a very young age. I was 4.5 years old, and I still have a few memories of him. But then it was what happened after. So when he passed, he left my mom at 19 years old, a single mother, a widower with three kids, ages 4, 2. My younger brother Art was 2 years younger than me, and my sister Marie at 6 months, just a baby.
Mm.
So I think for me, my childhood was really heavy in terms of that adult responsibility. I was the oldest, before my pops passed away. He told me, I remember with the whole oxygen and all that, he was in his little deathbed. I didn't know that at the time, but my last memory of him was him saying, Mijo, you're the man of the house now,
Mm.
and I need you to make me proud. So being just a little kid, that pressure, that responsibility and stuff, like given almost like this adult responsibility and be called upon to help raise your siblings and all that made childhood, there was these good fun moments because you really don't know what it is when being low income and being poor on on what we used to call welfare programs and food stamps, before the EBT card and all that, right? We're on the food stamps and like, the welfare cheese and making quesadillas and grilled cheese out, like, and the powdered milk and like all that, right? Like I shared a story of like, not really knowing how it was to live in poverty, but knowing that when I was in I think I was in third grade and my shoe had a big old hole in it,
Mm.
and we ran out of masking tape. We couldn't pull that movida to fold the tape and press it together, right? Like to just pull that movida. But it rained.
Mm.
And my mom, she's a little chaparita. She's only like 4'10" with really small feet, but she had some size fives. And I think I might have been like a size 3.5, whatever. So she put on a couple of pairs of socks and
Mm.
put me in her white LA gears, took off the pink laces, put the white laces on, and sent me to school. And I
Damn.
remember walking in, oh my God, are they gonna think that I'm wearing girls' shoes? Like, oh, when you're a kid, it's just all that shame and all that shit that, like, I mean, probably nobody cared, right? But in my mind, that was that first moment, I think, where my class, I did, being low income, being in poverty, that was that, and me thinking, I don't ever want to feel like this again.
Mm.
Like this ain't cool, even though as a kid you feel like you kind of get over it. So I will say that a lot of my childhood, being that I know that there was other kids that had it a lot harder, I will say that having adult responsibility and stuff was almost kind of like a gift, but at the same time, I think it was a curse because there was times where I had a lot of anger, I had a lot of sad, I was just a little boy that wanted to have a dad and kind of was just really holding on to this anger and resentment. Like everyone's telling me to pray to Jesus and to pray to God and like kind of pushing a little bit of faith, right? But when you're a kid, it's like you can't even get to that level. All you see is immediate like need. Like you want to be able to play soccer with your dad. You see your neighbors do it, you want to do it. You want to join like, Boy Scouts or whatever, and oh, but you need to have a dad for that,
Mm.
like all that kind of stuff. So I think, what that did a little bit was those seeds of kind of like anger and hurt at a very young age was already kind of like planted there. And it was more when I got into my teenage years that all that kind of festered up to where it was kind of like me against the world.
Yeah.
Fighting and just getting like just going into it, and it was rough because I don't remember those moments of anybody really pulling me aside and saying, "Hey Johnny, what's going on, man? Why are you so angry all the time? Like, why you fighting?" And But yeah, it was a crazy time in my childhood too. 1980s, homie. 1980s. And what we know now, it was right at the cusp of mass incarceration and the three strikes law that happened in the 90s and everything. So I grew up still looking up to the big homies with their hair nets. And, I saw that images of masculinity, like you got to be strong, you got to be tough, and you can't be no little mama's boy. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I was a little kid that used to like to read comic books and do like those things, but I knew once I was on my bike out in the street, like I knew that, and then I had to look after my brother and sister. Hell yeah, chunk them up. Like, you kind of do that. I'm not saying that I was anything crazy, but there was plenty of times where I had to take on dudes that were older than me, that were I was in elementary, they were in middle school already.
Mm.
And being a chubby kid too, those fools would just be like try to comfort me too and try to test. And I remember one time this tall, like he was in eighth grade, dude, and I was like in fifth. But I remember like, dude, if I just like tackle, like if I just bum rush him and get him on the ground, he's done. This kid's not going to be able to get up because I'm going to. And my brother has a good story. He remembers it. He's like, you just like bum rushed him and just like sacked him to the ground. And when that fool tried to get up, you were hammering on him. I was like,
Damn.
yeah, it's like one of those ones where like you're a kid and you just like, yeah. Unfortunately, I think the anger at those times would get it to where what do they call it when you see red? When
Mm.
it's just really out of control. And yeah, man, knock on wood, thank God it never like escalated to where if I ever had a weapon in my hand and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What about like any hobbies that you had? I know in the 80s, hip hop was emerging as the number
Yeah,
one
that's a great
genre,
question.
break
Yeah.
dancing, the graffiti's
Yeah.
taking
So
over.
when I'm coming up at the park, I see all the homies in their crease Pendletons, their white Stanford shirts, their hairnets or whatever. But at the basketball court, I'm seeing these giant ass, what they call ghetto blasters with these big old radios with 30 batteries, like 30 double D batteries in there bumping, and homies with the white gloves on and the lokes and the fedora pop blocking and doing the Egyptian lover and folks breakdancing. Dude, I was at the cusp of that. So I was born in 75. So 80, I was 5 years old.
Mm.
By the time, like, when was the Pope here? The Pope in the Olympics was in 84. So I was 8 years old. And I remember it was on in the neighborhood. I felt like I had the homies over there on the tables and like there, but then all the fun stuff was the hip hop stuff. And I always tell that as part of my story. Like, I can't say that it was all just like gangster shit and just, street shit and all that, because no, there was also hip hop happening. And I was leaning in, and I was a chubby kid that thought he could do the windmill and thought he could do the kickworm and shit, like pop blocking and trying to like, develop a little crew and all that. Like I remember that. And it's funny having a young mom too. She was part of a party crew called the Master Mixers that were out of Pomona, and they had like the little dancers, like the break dancers and stuff, because back then it was all about the DJ. So they had these shirts and everything, and we used to be the breakers and pop blockers for the Master Mixers. So whenever they did a wedding or whenever they did like like a car show, we'd be out there try to get it and everything too.
That's dope.
So yeah, yeah. So that which later, as you know, in my youth work and working in hip hop culture and rhyming and all that, like yeah, I was getting a little bit of that as a kid, and that was fun. Like that was without knowing, you don't need to have like fancy clothes or money to do that. You don't need to leave your neighborhood and have to go to a better quote unquote conditions or a better place to do that. We were just doing that. The dope thing about my childhood too was living so close to Gladstone Park and Azusa. I lived a half a block away. So I felt like as a kid, especially childhood memories was always like kind of being at our park. And they had a little rec center in there and everything too.
Mm.
Um, so
Prime
yeah,
time.
I definitely remember them hip hop. Yeah, the 80s. Yeah, bro, it was on.
I know we get this question a lot being the big fools, but did you ever play sports?
I did.
Mm.
I did. Yeah, yeah. So when I was a kid, one of the biggest treats that I had in my childhood that I think, and I always was so thankful for, my grandma or selling the chocolate candies in those little like cardboard suitcases and everything
Ooh.
to fundraise. We used to play Little League. And it started in that rec program where they just give you a little t-shirt and they throw you out there. And I just, fell in love with baseball, and then rest in peace, Fernando. I remember being a kid, watching Dodgers and everything. So yeah, every year our goal was to kind of like save cans, sell candy, do it so that we could play Little League.
Mm.
And not to get all like dust my shoulders off. I was a pretty good kid, even being a chubby kid, like playing. And I
Yeah.
look at the pictures where I always felt like a chubby kid, kind of. But in the pictures, I wasn't that like I wasn't that like the big homie like I am now. But in the mind, yeah.
Mm.
But you kind of you feel that way because you're not like the other kids per
Mm.
se, right? But yeah, I was when I started off, I was a pitcher, and I started off playing shortstop. And then through the years, I remember we won a Little League back-to-back champions there at the park, and I was playing first base and I was playing catcher at that time. And then my younger brother, that's a year and a half, 2 years younger than me, we used to do the brother draft so that my mom could take us to just one practice and to be able to go to one game. So he became a pitcher, and he ended up keeping with sports and played varsity ball and all that. I want to believe that as a big brother, I'm the one that helped him. I used to be his catcher. I could throw hard, but I can't throw hard to him because when he's little, he can't catch it. But
Yeah.
that little fool could throw as hard as he wanted to me because I could catch it. And I was and when we won those championships, I was learning how to be a catcher.
Mm.
Like the whole not turning your back when the ball to use the equipment, to not be afraid, basically, and keep the ball in front of you, and gunning people at second and gunning people at third from my knees and all that. So yeah, I love that question. I was. And when I think about later on, where I see with a lot of youth now, all that team sports gave me is it gave me access to, thank God I had good coaches. I never had any negative, bad coaches. Some of them were good, positive male role models. A couple of Huerito Cavachos, but a lot of Chicanos were good role models and stuff that had us friends with their sons, and sometimes would do extras for us, take us to their house to go swimming, maybe at their pool, or do like something extra and just like invite us. So I did feel community, but I think ultimately what team sports did is I think it planted a seed where I didn't know that I was an organizer yet, but in every team that I pretty much was on, at some point I would be a team captain,
Mm.
and I'd be getting everybody on program and chatting everybody up, and I'd be on first base or catcher, chatter, like you better chatter, I'm gonna fuck you up kind of thing, like yeah, like coming hard, militant, but yeah, I thank God for that, because when I think of all the stressors and all the shit from like childhood trauma, baseball and that little league, for that season, for those 3 months, that was the escape. That was where play was giving restoration and giving me a bit of healing. I loved it.
Mm. I have to ask this because I have John Cena here, and in the '80s, Hulk Hogan was like the
Yeah.
biggest star in the world. Were you a fan of wrestling?
Oh yeah, bro. Yeah, growing up, I remember it was like watching cartoons all Saturday, like in the mañana, like in the morning,
Yeah.
like, oh, get all that. And then there used to be the Saturday night's main event. And it would be like cracking like at 10:30, 11 or something, and begging moms, let us stay up late. Let us say, just come on, please. We'd almost like cry with
Mm.
water in our eyes, cry, please, please, please. And then she'd be like, okay, but you're not gonna see the whole thing. You're only gonna see some of it. You're gonna have to go. So we'd get in there, and oh, dude, yeah, like definitely wrestling was a big part of my childhood memories too, of like Hulk Hogan, Randy the Macho Man, Savage, the Junkyard Dog, like I could go down the list of like the little heroes, that were there. Tito Santana, like it was dope. And what I do remember at that time is, again, kind of being a latchkey kid too. Mom starting to work, you just come home, and a lot of times without knowing it, you're being raised by TV
Mm-hmm.
you know and having wrestling was also one of those cool ones where right after wrestling would end, then we'd get the pillows off the couch and shit and try to make like a little ring. We'd go and start doing moves and shit, start doing the DDTs and the Jake the Snake Roberts and shit, like,
Yeah.
yeah, getting all hyped up. But yeah, it's crazy that like it's a great question. Yeah, like wrestling was a big part of it. And again, kind of like, because I'm in the 80s, so I'm at the cusp of gaming in like kind of computer game culture. So Nintendo barely comes out in the late 80s. Atari's kind of there, and we didn't have one initially, like the old system. And then like kind of the late 80s into the 90s, then really game culture, Sega, Nintendo goes into Nintendo 64. Like, so then kids have another thing besides just kind of watching just TV, is what I'm trying to
Mm.
say. And I think I was part of that generation of we watched a lot of TV, and then we had our VCR. So then we would go and rent all the videos and then come in with like a stack, right? And then like the WrestleManias that we couldn't buy on the pay-per-view, we'd all get caught up and that kind of shit. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Damn, that's beautiful, man.
I remember that.
I I I got to see Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, at their
Oh,
peak. So it was a
oh
beautiful
yeah.
beautiful thing. So I got to see the rise of John Cena. That's why he's my favorite
Mm,
wrestler. But it's cool, I like the different eras, and we all have our heroes. But
yeah.
you mentioned something about Saturday morning cartoons. I didn't know that was a thing back in the day too.
Yeah, it really was like being like a kid that would grew up on watching TV a lot and stuff. There was always part of the year where we had to go back to school, like right, like in the fall, like okay, you're kicking rocks because summer's over, and now you go back to school. But there was always that first Saturday in September where the new like launches, like the new cartoons are going to come in. And
Mm.
I'll never forget, I don't know if I was in third grade or fourth grade, but I remember that one time they made the WWF cartoon. They
Oh.
made Mr. T and Friends. They did the X-Men. It was just like one Saturday. Oh, they did Mr. and Miss Pac-Man. Like they did all the video game cartoons, all the wrestling cartoons. Anyhow, I just remember getting up like at 6 in the morning and starting to watch cartoons all the way into the afternoon, bro. And you could easily just, and all of them were like hitters. All of them were like, like Dungeons and Dragons. Like just, it was dope. Like, yeah, cartoon culture was pretty. And then if you look at some of the old school ones from the 80s, some of them had pretty good, strong storylines, like
Mm.
Robotech, which kind of like was Japanese anime that they kind of flipped over. And again, that Dungeons and Dragons one I think was pretty good too. That was like based off the comics and stuff. So yeah, yeah. Again, I think it was just that moment too, because I think our kids are still kind of youth are still kind of into it, but it's a little bit different because I think there's more like following Japanese anime, which kind of takes it to a whole different level, and then gaming.
Mm.
Yeah,
Then now you have everything on YouTube, so there's no need for TVs and stuff. But I know if you have Disney Plus, they have all the old X-Men animated,
I saw that. Yeah.
Spider-Man, like all the old school like 90s Marvel what are the cartoons, right? I mean,
Yeah.
from comic to cartoon, those
Yeah.
are
Uh-huh. Yeah. And
classics.
and the one that like really set it off is when DC did The Dark Knight Returns. I think I was like a ninth or a 10th grader when The Dark Knight. So you could catch like The Dark Knight, like the Batman series that was animated, and then right after that would be like the X-Men series
Mm.
and then like the Animaniacs or something like that. Like they kind of had like a crazy mix, but yeah, there was I think a moment a golden era of cartoons, and I think I and it's funny we're talking, and I think I grew up right through it, just like the golden era of hip hop. I think too. I kind of grew up during that era too.
Blessed. I was born in
Yeah,
95, so I missed all that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, oh yeah,
So I
oh
missed all
my
that.
goodness, yeah, yeah. So by the time like you're in kindergarten, it's 2000.
Yeah, Simon.
Oh my gosh. So from 90 to 2000, if you would look at the arc of music, like, wow, bro. Yeah. That's
So,
crazy.
so you become a teenager in the 90s, correct? The
Yeah.
late 80s, 90s?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
What was being a teenager when
Mm.
NWA's, they're splitting up at this point, right? Ice Cube's going in his own direction.
Yeah, I remember that.
Dr.
Yeah.
Dre, they're starting Death Row Records because we're out here in the West Coast, but
Yeah.
now you hear the East Coast, right? You
Mhm.
hear Wu Tang in the 90s, Nas in the 90s, Mob Deep. What was that like?
Wow, bro. Well, first, let me say that, like, I think I was always kind of a unique homie, like, because I always had it down with my Ben Davis and everything. A lot of it was the style of the 90s, but a lot of it was always like me kind of being proud of being from the neighborhood and in a way that was kind of like my cultural identity, but then also kind of like my community, my hood identity. But I know that a lot of that time, as I'm in middle school, getting my first like little tape of Mary Wells' greatest hits and
Mm,
Barbara Mason and Del Font,
yeah.
like getting all into the oldies and
Mm,
like increasing up and everything. Right at that time becomes like Kid Frost, and This Is for the Raza, and Mellow Man Ace, and Proper Dos, Mexican Power, and Frankie V and all them. So I will say, as being a Chicano, that even though there was like Young MC, It Takes Two to Get Big, and KRS is kind of hitting, and like you have like some of the other like OG Godfather, or OG, elders of rap that were young, like kind of doing it. I think being a Chicano, kind of growing up at that time in LA, you still kind of just leaned into kind of staying in your little box of like just Kid Frost and Frankie V and everything, like for those Chicano MCs. Not that some of the radio play with like with the Fresh Prince and Young MC, like I said, in Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock and all that kind of dance music. Our gente were kind of into that, but I don't know if they really were like thinking this is hip hop culture yet. And what is hip hop culture? But I think I was a kid that always loved music enough that I was always down to like go and hear like a mixtape or stay up late when I got into high school and watch a show by D Barnes. And it was a show called Pump It Up. And Pump It Up would interview all the artists. So D Nice, Boogie Down Productions, X Clan, oh my God, Ed OG and the Bulldogs out of Philly. Of course, Eric B and Rakim, like all that. So I was already kind of like, in a way, that was like my ethnic studies. I was like seeing the world through a lot of these black brothers and sisters as artists. I was kind of getting pulled into the stories they were telling
Mm.
and wanting to learn about that. And I say even sisters too, because Queen Latifah was killing it. MC Light was sick with it. Moni Love. And then when we got the West Coast, when we got Yo-Yo, you can't play with my yo. When Cube was trying to push Yo-Yo and the homie from Watts, Cam, West Coast Cam,
Yeah.
and Peace Treaty and everything, when he was trying to put them out, that was dope because again, by that time, like Ice Cube is kind of holding it down for the West. So yeah, I guess I could say it's going from in 7th and 8th grade, getting my first We Want Easy cassette and then
Mhm.
getting the record and just like, I can't believe they're cussing. I can't believe they're talking all this shit. I can't believe they're using the N word, soft A or whatever, like tripping, like, oh shit, because this is a little Chicanito from the SGV. I'm not growing up like in your neighborhood. I wasn't growing up in South LA. I wasn't in the mix. I was in these little barrio communities that were probably 90% raza, Mexican American or Mexican immigrant. It was giving me a glimpse into a whole other cultura and a whole other world. Um, but yeah, man, it was a trip. But then when I got into high school and we get closer to like, okay, the split happens, no Vaseline, oh shit. And then Cube hits it with the Death Certificate album. Fuck.
Have it. I have the vinyl cover right here on my
Yeah,
wall right
Death
here. That shit.
Certificate hits, and you're like, damn, like this guy's a genius. And then it feels like then it kind of like after that explosion and it comes, and then I see it in the back, the Chronic hits
Boom.
on 93 when the rebellions went down, and now I'm a senior. And I'm like, dude, everybody's rocking the Chronic, the Bud Leaf hat, and everybody was just on it, bro. And that's when I was just like, wow, like I'm seeing, I guess, the birth of West Coast culture, Warren G, that G Funk era, like all that. So at that point, I feel like everybody was just still more on like, we got to support the West, we got to support the West. It wasn't that they weren't looking to the East, but then Wu Tang hits, Mob Deep hits, Nas hits. Jay hits into the mid 90s, like 95, 96. It just then, even our radio stations, the record play starts to shift, where now it's like, it's undeniable. You got to start playing some of like the East Coast artists and everything on there. And then on MTV, wasn't showing a lot of hip hop videos at that time too. Only the Yo MTV Raps with Ed Lover and the DJ Dr. Dre would be there too. So I think I just had a unique thing where I didn't know I was really engulfing like all of hip hop culture. It wasn't just the West Coast, but I would like or like the Fushnikins and Daz Effects and the
Mm.
Tribe Called Quest and like all them like them golden ears. When I would get those cassettes and play them, I used to be like, this is the shit. But could like to my homie Snapper from Pico Viejo and the homie Travieso from like from South Fontana, I couldn't play those tapes around them.
Yeah.
Like strong enough in my beliefs and in my culture to be like, oh, check these out, homie. No, it's got to be oldies. It's got to be like you got to stay in your lane. Because
Chicano only,
yeah.
homie.
And you're not that. That's black, right? That's what the negro like. That ain't you. Even though what was funny when I started doing my youth work at Pico Center in particular in 2002, y'all were having those little shuffles and the little iPod culture.
Mm,
And that was the first time that I thought that the young people were doing it way different than in my teen years. That y'all have playlists like your like banda playlist. And
mm.
then you would have your like rock playlist with like Linkin Park and all that alternative shit. And then you would have your hip hop playlist. And then there'd be like Ella James or some jet like y'all were way more open with it. But if you talk to some of the homies from my era, it's like if you were down for this, it meant that you had to conduct yourself in this type of way.
Mm, mm.
So I almost kind of had to be like like in low key with my hip hop shit.
Oh,
Like
that's
because and I wouldn't play with them anyways because I don't think any of them would really like appreciate the lyrics and the speed, the fast rapping of like Twista and like yeah, like they like it wasn't. But the more that hip hop became more mainstream and more commercialized as we get into 98, 99, Nelly, like just the whole vibing of the dance, like in club music,
mm.
that's when I think a lot of folks were just way more open to say, oh yeah, like 50 Cent, the homies, the knuckleheads, oh, that's my shit right there. Or, beyond just Dre and the West Coast.
You didn't talk about this, but I have to because Tupac's my favorite rapper of all time. How was it being a youngster, dog? Like I'm youngsters, right? When Tupac
Oh
and
yeah.
Biggie.
I'll never forget getting the first so I want to give a shout outs to my homie Jose. He was kind of like a little like kind of makeshift DJ and he used to mix with the cassette players and everything and he used to call himself DJ Rhino and he was a puertorriqueño. He was a good homie. His mom and dad didn't work out, right? They got divorced. So the mom married a güerito and he was a pig. Well, he was a cop. And I remember that my homie spent a lot of times in his room, like he didn't come out of there. That he didn't like the stepdad. The stepdad really didn't like him, kind of thing. But he was my homie because I would go to the like dollar store with it, and I would get the packets of the blank cassettes,
Mm.
and then he would get all the like music, and then set me up and makes me mixtapes, dog. So dude, I remember when he gave me the full on Tupacalypse now, like he gave me just straight up, not mixed, but he just gave me the copy. I remember playing When the Homies Call.
Mm.
And Brenda had a baby so many times that the tape got stuck into my tape player. Because those tapes are cheap, dog. Like you got to be nice to them. You can't just be reminding all hard, like rewind, play, rewind, play. But homie, I remember that, and I remember like that was the one level of it. And then boom, when the video, like when the homies called video comes out, and they're all like running, and then You Got Me Trapped when that video came out,
Ooh.
and then of course Brenda Got a Baby, which I still teach on in my classes. There's a few songs and videos that we profile in the class, and Brenda Has a Baby is always like that's a mandatory too. Because I think even some of this generation, they see more Pac when he's with Death Row and Suge and kind of like the later part of his life after being locked up and stuff. They don't remember his youth or know his story and how his first album was really that was kind of like his first like that was kind of built around his youth and the idea of being a young revolutionary, but trying to be for the homies,
Mm.
like trying to be their revolutionary. And
I,
and and, and just being so young and feeling that pressure of like trying to be a leader and trying to do it in the music.
I think that's why the youth gravitate towards Tupac because everybody sees themselves in him.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that Dear Mama that the oh my goodness their names are right of the brothers. They made Menace to Society and they helped one of the brothers. It'll come to me right now. But I love the Dear Mama because I think again it kind of gives you that idea that when Pac is talking about the rose that grew from the concrete,
Mhm.
really talking about kind of his life too. And
Yeah.
I don't think, if folks would know that, we should be so thankful of Tupac and what he was willing to give to the world and everything when he easily just on the trauma of going in poverty and with his mom and like if he didn't have that political consciousness and that grounding, Tupac could have got lost in the streets a long time ago. It's the Hughes brothers. Yeah, it's the one
Okay.
of the Hughes brothers, and it's funny because Pac fought them on the film side of Menace to Society because Pac was supposed to be he was
Right.
doing the reading of Sharif, which was the Nation of Islam guy that had his dad there as the teacher. I think his name was the last name is Sutton, the actor. But yeah, and then they got in a fight and everything, and they pressed charges and everything. And but yeah, but one of the Hughes brothers comes back and works with Pac's mom and the Tia, rest in peace, and they put the documentary together.
I haven't finished it, so I don't really want to get too into it.
Yeah,
Obviously,
my
it's
bad.
no, it's good. No, you good.
Yeah, my
It's
bad.
something I already know, but it's just it's a reminder. It's another reminder of to me. That's why he's the GOAT. But Biggie comes out, right?
Yeah.
You're still a youngster. How was that like?
Dude, I think that, thinking that I think before Biggie, I think it was always in my mind that Ice Cube was one of the best storytellers
Mm.
that could just take you in, into just like into that world, right? Like they can really paint a picture for you and tell you the shit, how to survive a South Central, busting the cap is fundamental,
Mm.
and breaking down the rules to the shit, right? Like giving you those vivid images. I'll never forget. So with Biggie, it wasn't the cassette. By that time, I had the little CD player and everything. So it was the CD, and then you drop that in. Everything from the very beginning of like the birth and the crying and it's here and it's just the whole album is his story. And hell yeah, dog, that was I think at that point, and then at that point, to keep it 100, now I'm in my late teens, so I'm like 18, 19, 20. So I'm drinking, I'm smoking, like so I'm even getting more into to the storytelling and to the imagery and really what like the like basically the picture he's painting, right? Of like his reality and sick with it, bro. At that point, I'm like, I know Cube is gonna be my all time, but Biggie, like this is like off the chain, bro. Yeah, I didn't need to see the videos on that one to confirm. I'm just like listening to the tracks and I'm like, yeah, because nothing like in the West Coast like had it's just the beats and the story it was just yeah, I think it again just like they say the Chronic captured West Coast culture and took the world in to the realities of being in the West Coast and LA in particular. I think Ready to Die and Biggie took us into his life in Brooklyn, and he took us into right there on a um oh man, I always forget not Holton, but yeah, the street where they would post up at. It took us right there to him growing up.
I have to do this, Johnny.
Yeah.
What is top three favorite albums?
Oh, in hip hop.
Simon.
Yeah. Oh, oh man.
Or you could do a top five si quieres.
Yeah, top
Make it
five.
easier.
Let's see. Well, I think, just because, Pac again, like, that's like, yeah, just, he changed the world, not that there are any other artists that have done that, but for me. So again, and because of just the messaging and everything, probably Tupacalypse Now for Pac. Cube's Death Certificate for sure. That's two. The Chronic, three. Yeah, Biggie, Life, yeah, Ready to Die, that's four. Um, oh man, I feel Tribe Called Quest is pulling at me. Wu-Tang is pulling at me, like yeah, 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 Tribe Called Quest and Mass Marauders, and of course, Wu-Tang and the Thirsty Chambers. Yeah, like yeah, yeah, man.
I just it's hard because for a long time, like for me, my favorite album all time is the Infamous by Mobb Deep,
Oh
right?
yeah, that's a
But
class.
that's one B. One A is Tupac, but for a long time it was All Eyes on Me.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Recently, as I've gotten older and I'm listening to Me Against the World a lot, that became my favorite album of all
Yeah.
time. Those two, Me Against the World and The Infamous by Mobb Deep, the Cycle Room, the first album that they dropped, the Cycle
Oh
Room,
yeah.
Get Rich
Yeah.
or Die Trying by 50 Cent. Just 'cause I was a little kid when that came out.
And that was his story too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then number five would probably have to be, see, that's always where it gets a little tricky, because yeah, I mean I could put All Eyes on Me on that too. I was a big Tupac fan.
Sure.
36 Chambers, you can't go wrong with that. Yeah, I mean I have a lot of these posters right here, but nunca se puede. You can never
Yeah,
get.
yeah, no, no, no. And I'm forgetting even like, Lauryn Hill, and I'm forgetting about the Fugees. I mean, when I'm thinking of some of those classic tunes was growing up where you just threw the CD in and every song was a banger, bro.
Mm,
And you just let it loop.
yeah,
It's just, and I don't even know if music's being made that way anymore. It's very rare. Like,
it's the
yeah, I
times. It's a sign of the times.
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a different level of like consumption now, and kind
Most,
of like what can make it to a record. And I
yeah.
think like they use it in hip hop, that metaphor of sports, like your game, and you had to be super super nice to even be able to get into studios and to be able to put your stuff out, because you didn't want to be the like a whack MC, like that would be you'd be ashamed, you'd get run out the hood, kind of thing. So you had to come super sharp and super clean with it. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that level, if it is where it was before, because that pushed that your work had to be like almost like immaculate, Yeah.
I have to ask this because obviously, as Chicanos, we grow up with that whole it's like my parents weren't like too like controlling when it came to music, right? Where it's like, oh, you can't listen to rap music. Obviously, when you're a little kid, I was listening to fucking Straight Outta Compton in fifth grade, right? So you're bumping "Fuck the Police" loud as fuck
Yeah.
and trying to be, because I'm from South Central. You hear South Central and the lyrics, so
Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out my identity. So they weren't really too controlling when it came to me listening to hip hop. But then in middle school, I got into Chicano rap, right? But at this point, it's like 2006 to
yeah,
2009.
oh,
It's like
yeah,
we have all these new Chicano rappers. What was
yeah.
like you mentioned Kid Frost and Mellow Man Ace, and obviously, I mean, Cypress Hill isn't Chicano rap, but they're Latino rappers, right?
Sure.
They're
And in my
raza.
opinion too, if I throw it out there, because I have this idea and I could talk a little bit of what I think Chicano rap is, and respectfully, right? Like if I name artists, it's not that I'm saying and putting down my raza. They just, the style, the delivery, the lyrics just never really, like, I think I got so rooted into hip hop culture and being looking for a certain kind of rhyme delivery and a certain kind of strength of the lyrics, that when I would see some of the Chicano rappers, maybe in my mind, not kind of measure up, or maybe even me giving them a chance that they could even be delivering in another way. I just, yeah, like to me, Psycho Realm wouldn't be, at least in my mind, considered Chicano rap, just because of both of their lyrics. Sick Jack and Big Duke was,
Next level.
yeah, to me, like Be Real in them. That's why they're in that kind of conversation. But then with all due respect, you put him in a freestyle back and forth of like Sick Jack and Little Rob, or the Charlie Roll homies, and put all of them against Sick Jack or Big Dude, and like you're just gonna see it. There, to me at least, there's gonna be a difference in bars and everything. Just delivery in terms of writing the beat. There was a time for me that I struggled with Chicano rap because I just felt like these fools are like kind of just like speaking into the mic, but I don't feel them like kind of like flowing,
Mm.
if
It was
that makes sense.
a lot of it is tied to the gangbanging stuff too, which is a whole different conversation, right? A whole
Yeah.
different conversation. I
And
don't
and,
want
if,
to
and I don't know if
politic.
you, yeah, yeah, no, O3, and I don't know if you know, but I remember at that time that you're talking about, like in 05, 06, whatever. That's when I start my youth work.
Mm.
I started at the Pico Center in 2002. And so I'm going, I'm reading, like I'm going to like youth development, kind of conferences. Like I'm learning about our young people. And of course, they're having conversations like what is this thing like? Because a lot in the placements, a lot in the group homes, a lot of our young, the young homies that you were growing up at that time were really hardcore into Chicano rap.
Yeah.
It was like a big thing, dog. Like
High powered.
little Mr. Evil and like just I'm trying
Yeah.
to remember of all the names, but
Big Locote.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Even Spanky Loco and all that, like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, so they're in, and it was hard because I think it's sometimes they were trying to sell their stories,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the way they marketed on the CD and everything was more of marketing the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It was the more tats you had on your face, the more that it looked like you just got out of the pinta, that's what's gonna to get the connection in. It might not be how good of quality the music was, right? And what I was getting at was the largest consumers of Chicano rap at that time were kids ages 8 years old to 13 years old. So me as a youth worker, that shit used to frustrate me because I used to be like, look at these homies that got these youngsters and pumping them up and talking all this shit. And these youngsters don't even really know anything else,
Mm.
you know? But they're thinking that these guys, even though some of them were the real life, right? They had the what is it, the paperwork to back, but some of them were fucking studio gangsters too. They were being something that they weren't because it was to market that.
Mm.
And I felt like a lot of our young folks were being like lied to, kind of. And again, like if you really like rap, how could you listen to this dude that barely could even rhyme, or kind of with a weak cadence, and then you could maybe listen to like the Woo or something. I
Yeah.
don't it was just like a different time. It was like me being a bigger homie and seeing the little homies and being like, oh, that's trash. Like you got, like, you don't even know. Just like they did in generations before, like when the rock and roll and everything, you're supposed to be Black Sabbath and like, Iron Maiden, like all the hardcore shit. And then they were like into like like the rock that was coming out of Seattle and it grunge.
Yeah, like
The
Nirvana.
OG rock, yeah, yeah, Nirvana, and then the OG rock kids, fucking that ain't rocking, that ain't man. What is that shit? And I
Mm.
felt like that's kind of how I was a little bit with Chicano rap. I couldn't put it together.
Now, out of my neighborhood, obviously they came out in the 90s, brown side, right? The
Remember
east
them?
side,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're from
And
this
Brownside's the one that Easy was trying to,
Simon.
yeah, that like found and was mentoring the homie, the
Yeah,
older
Toker. Yeah.
poker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he had them in line. Did you ever know that Easy had that radio where he thought the next group to bust in gangster rap was going to be Chicanos? And it was
Simon.
on 92.3 The Beat. Oh, the Ruthless Radio Show. If you go to YouTube and pull up Ruthless Radio Show, they have some introductions where they like flow to
Mm.
do the introduction to the show. So JV, the neighborhood queen, ALT, another Latin time bomb, he's busting, and Brownside
Mm.
us on one of those intros. Yeah.
So it was
Remember?
easy for me because obviously they're not like from directly where I live at, but it's like a 5 minute from here. They're still from this side. They're still from this side of town. So, my older cousins, my older brother, they're like 3 years older than me. So when they're in middle school and they're getting exposed to that, I'm in elementary school. I'm listening to my older brother listen bumping Brownside.
Right.
Now I'm in middle school, right? And I'm not talking about Brownside like early 2000s. I'm talking about 90s Brownside.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
Bear
yeah.
just came out,
Yeah.
Payback, Life on the Streets,
Yeah.
straight Easy E comes out in East Side Drama, like all these bangers that I'm listening to in the mid 2000s, but they came out in the 90s. And like you said, eventually it took a life on its own. Now it's a big market, well, within the community,
Sure.
right? I don't
I think
know.
it's beautiful what you're breaking down too. Is like it's not only that, okay, yeah, they were kind of building or like the OGs of the Chicano rap culture, but it was also your neighborhood. Like it's like these are the rappers that are in our neighborhood
Yeah.
and they're Rasa doing it, which is kind of cool too, because they should do a documentary. I don't know if there one exists that really looks like at those early generation of kind of the neighborhood rappers that started all that. Brownside, the homies out of Oxnard. There was a few different areas that had like that Chicano rap or like kind of go into the lowrider show and like that would be your big thing is to get on the bill, to be
Yeah.
on the flyer and to perform, was like doing that. Yeah.
Last hip hop question before we start talking about your education.
Sure.
Um, Big fan of hip hop, right? You know all this thing about the culture. You grew up prime time. Did you ever participate in the culture? Were you ever a writer? Like, do you ever write lyrics? Do you ever
Oh,
graffiti?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I tried the graph like a little bit, like I tried to like flow with the little style or whatever. I was I was a toy dog. I like, but yeah, it was things that we did like on our folders, on our notepads, like try to mob them up, like to try to start a name and everything, to get a name going. I do remember I was part of a youth program, like it was a church program that was like set up to like, try to like, work with young folks, kind of keep us off the street, keep us focused on like, like doing, the youth program would organize football games with the homies and like all that. So I remember one time we went to this one youth group that hosted it, and all these fools rapped.
Mm.
They went on stage and they busted. And low key, right? I'm listening to X Clan. Like I'm getting like I'm listening to way more hip hop than all my homies. So already I had played a little bit of the idea of what would it be to rhyme. So I remember one of the first rhymes that I ever wrote down was kind of like a church rap. It wasn't that good, but compared to my homies that saw what I was doing and like getting the rhymes together, that got them hyped up to want to do it. So then I'm over there helping to ghostwrite their shit. And then my little brother always following, I ghostwrite his stuff, and we somehow like kind of put it together. Again, we weren't the shit, but enough to get on some mics and bust. When they came to visit our youth program, we did the counter, and we put an instrumental. We used an Eric B and Rakim, that one that samples "I'm Curious." We used that one. So I remember that was my first time, kind of like even writing lyrics and grabbing a mic and standing in front of people and try like just going for it. And I guess like in the spirit of hip hop for the love, like kind of doing that. Um, and I always was blessed to be around some of the DJs. Like I said, my mom was in that powder party crew, the master mixers. So I would sometimes stand behind the turntables and watch them do it and stuff. And I had an older primo, my mom's cousin too, Henry, aka DJ Dinky, rest in peace. He just passed this last year. He was a longtime DJ, yeah. So I think I was around some of the elements of it. But yeah, I thought the tagging thing was always like more of the shit and racking cans. I rolled with the tagger homies. I just didn't have that. But I will say one thing. I did when I started to get more politicized, when I was getting ready, when I was running with those college students, those activists and stuff. I did start a little crew of my homies though, and it was supposed to be where we could do some graph and also back each other up or whatever. And we called it the CTO, Chicanos taking over. And and one time with the can, we did a crazy placa, a CTO placa. And the crazy thing is, we had a Samoan homie in our crew,
Mm.
but he looked Chicano. Everybody's name was Robert. Everybody thought because he had a goatee, combed his hair, they all thought he was Chicano. Only we in the inner circle knew that that fool was Samoan.
Uh,
So one time he told me, "Hey, um, hey, Johnny boy, like, how is this Chicano taking over? And I'm not even Chicano. Like I'm down for the Mexicans, but what are we gonna do here?" And I remember like, nah, you're Samoan, dog. You're proud of your shit. And then I'm getting exposed to Chicano power. So I'm like, well, why not you be Samoan power in effect? Why
mm.
don't you be Spy? And that fool ran with Spy, got it tatted. Like
Oh,
that
that's
was,
dope.
yeah, homie. He wrote, like, we still even talk about that when I get together with some of the old school homies, like whatever happened to Spy? But yeah, again, in that hip hop kind of like, spirit too, like you get the homies coming together to build a crew.
Mm. Okay, so you're you leave high school in the mid 90s, correct?
Yeah,
Late
93.
in the 90s. What was the plan after high school?
That's a great question, Othree. And my pad, so my mom remarried. She married and we moved from the Azusa Laverne area. We moved to Fontana here in the Inland Empire, 92. Go from living in apartments and and living with my grandma, thank God for my grandma that allowed us to live in their home for a while to save up, money and stuff. But my mom remarries and we move out there. So to be honest, there was no Avid, there was no college bound, like any of that stuff. So really, when it got close to graduation, one, I was so back on credits that I was doing the credit recovery program at that continuation school. So basically, I barely wiggled out of high school,
Mm.
probably with a D or C average. I barely get out of there. So, I never forget, like we're eating dinner one night. I don't know. I think we're tearing up some spaghetti. And out of the blue, my mom and my stepdad were like, hey, congratulations. We know that, graduation is just around the corner. So there's two things you need to either do to live here. One is you could go to the military and go and serve your country, travel, make money, whatever. Or two, you could go to college, but if you go to college, you're going to have to work. Or three, you're going to work full time and you're going
Mm.
to help out with the family, pay rent. And my mom and stepdad said, but what we really want you to do is to go to college and work at the same time and then try to see, to make a better life. My mom didn't never finished high school. She had me at 15, so she stopped in ninth grade. And my stepdad went to Vietnam and stuff. He finished high school, Garfield High School. Shout outs to Garfield High School. I think he was like class of 66 or 65. I was just talking to him about that because, the rivalry game of Roosevelt and everything too, I still want to get him with the Letterman's jacket out there. He still
Mm.
has it packed away somewhere. But anyhow, yeah. So anyhow, there was no plan. I'll tell you what happened. So what planted a little bit of the seed was those college activists about going to college, but in no way did I even know what college was or even beginning the process. But that summer, me and the homie Robert, my homie Doc, we were talking to these ladies, these females, these hyenas. We were talking to them or whatever, and they started to say, "Hey, they're registering to go to Chaffee Community College. They're registering." So my homie Doc is trying to hook up with this one homegirl, and she has her friends. So I'm trying to be the wingman to hook up with her homegirls. So like they're like, "Hey, well, we're coming here. You should make an appointment and like you need to sign up." So real talk, dog, I just followed them in. They would go to their appointment, I would go with them to try to spit game, try to work my way in, work my way in. And I fill out all the application or whatever. You at that time you have to wait in a long line for financial aid and everything. They helped you fill out the paperwork, first gen everything. I'm learning this process, or not really learning at the time because I'm just showing up. And so I enrolled. And I think the big part of my story started was I didn't have a car at that time, and the public transportation kind of sucks taking the bus from Fontana all the way to Chaffey College. It's like a 2-hour bus ride. It's not like LA where the transit system's a lot stronger. Out in the IE, you got to wait an hour or so for another bus to come and scoop you up. So I sign up and I decide to go. My family's happy. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just go to college. That basically I'm going because girls are there. So I'm gonna go basically.
Uh,
So that first semester was rough, bro. I took 2 history classes, our European history. That wasn't my thing at all. I wasn't on the Chicano studies bug yet either. I didn't know, but I just knew I was interested in history. Those classes sucked. I didn't like the reading. I didn't know how to write really well, so the professor was slamming me. And then I took a math class. That math class was pretty dope. It was with an Asian American professor. Shout outs to Professor Tom. And he was real cool and would like explain things to me. And I was like, kind of thinking maybe I wanted to major in math,
mm.
but I was just going. And I always laugh when I tell this story too, because taking that long bus ride, Kanat, at one point, like maybe in the second month in, I was like, F this shit, man. I'm getting up super early to go there to a class that I'm fucking getting F's in, all this red ink. I don't feel like I'm smart enough. What the fuck am I? I gotta actually pay and use my money from working at Big Five Sporting Goods and at the liquor store to buy books that I'm failing in. Like, fuck this shit. Like, I want a car. Like, it just wasn't. But when I was signing up for classes, one of the little homegirls there, her name was Monique, and we kind of signed up to have the same schedule. She kind of knew how to do it. So I would ride the bus in the morning with her, and I would ride the bus back with her.
Mm.
And dude, I was just, and she was cutie, real, like just down to earth and everything. And all these dudes would be trying to rolling up on her in their car. Hey, I'll give you a ride home. No, 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 I'm going home with him. And I'd just like be there. Like that that kept me going on the bus, dog. Was every day thinking I'm gonna see Monique. But anyhow, fast forward, I get to the end of the first semester, and I'm like, this can't give anymore. Like, I'm done here. And at Christmas time, my nana, she comes up to me and she says, "Look, mijo, when your dad passed away, there was some family in Texas that put some money together that wanted to give it to you when you got old enough so that you could use it to help you." And it was $900. I've never forget. It was $900, and I guess it sat in a little savings account. And I took that $900 and I bought for $800 this little hatchback Honda Excel Hoopty, where it was a two-door hatchback with the thing that hatched up. One side was perfectly tan and clear. The other side was all fucked up. So when I used to roll up to the homies' houses or whatever, I'd park my car so they could see the good side, not see the bad
Yeah.
side. Oh, and I threw two 12s and a Kenwood pullout in that mug, and I used to be mashing. But I remember what changed my whole trajectory was two things. I bought my first little car, and then that second semester, I signed up for my first Chicano studies class.
Mm.
And when I took that first class, I like found community. It was the first time that I was around like another Latino male teacher, a professor that was like kind of talking about like my experience, talking about migrant farm workers, which was the story of my grandparents, talking about the neighborhood and gang culture, which was like my parents and kind of like what I was growing up in. The history, the history of the Aztecs and the Mexica and like all that. And I just like it just all these little like little sparks or just connections are just happening. And that's when I was like, you know what? I remember sitting in the class and I'm like, I want to do this. Like, I want to be a professor. Like I want to, or at least be a teacher. And I wanted to be in Chicano studies.
And this is when you were in community college, right? That's a community
Heck, yeah,
college?
I took my first class I graduated in 94.
Mm.
94. And then I started from that class, I started going to Mecha. They had their like weekly meetings. I meet another group of friends. We're studying together. We're going to the metro. We're partying. It's like the peak of Latin house and the whole like party scene. So we're doing our thing at the same time. Again, Proposition 187, Prop 209, the fight to dismantle affirmative action, Prop 21, which is the juveniles being a life without parole and being charged as an adult. Prop 21 leads to youth mass incarceration. Like all this shit is going down. And in our community college Mecha, we're partying and we're kicking it and building community and we're doing school, but we're also doing activism.
Mm.
And I think that also kind of helped ground where like I didn't kick it as much with my homies in the neighborhood anymore. I really started kicking it with my school homies that little by little kind of became family too.
You found
And
your crew, dog. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
And it's what the literature says for a lot of like brown and black males that are in higher ed is they need to find a place where they find community, they find connection, they find a sense of belonging. And once our students, like young men of color, find that if they have a question or so, there's at least some place they can go to get support or help, that's a big key in them actually sticking it through and finishing.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So you take this Chicano studies course at this community college. What what led to you going to your undergrad?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of like the first time that like in this class I was so passionate about learning. The fact that I never really wore my glasses, but when I got there, my mom had the Kaiser insurance. I fucking got glasses and started wearing them for the first time. I'm over there reading. I'm trying to take notes. It was kind of in a way where I think because of Chicano studies, I gave 100% in a sense to my education, trying to do all the assignments, trying to do all the reading, even though my writing struggled still at that time, going to the writing lab. I didn't know what a writing lab was, but going there and checking homes. We weren't on computers yet. So some of my original papers, dog, I had to write in pen and then get on the pinchy typewriter, dog,
Woo.
and fucking get it done, bro. I was sending my first early papers in community college were like that. So that's the fully academic engagement. But then the mecha and the leadership starts to take off. And not going into the fall of 94, after in my first, 94, I'm the mecha president. And I have my crew of leaders. And then we just start getting active on campus, fundraisers, going to the high schools, working with the Mecha Central, Cal Poly Mecha, UCR Mecha, Claremont College's Mecha. Like, and we're mobilizing, we're going to these marches. Like it's heating up and we're doing all this great work. And then 94 goes into 95. Now I'm in my last year, and the student government, shout outs to Susan Stewart. Johnny, you're a leader. You have so much, you're in Mecha, but a lot of students respect you as a leader and everything. Why don't you take the next step and be student trustee? Why don't you sit on the governing board of the college and take on issues that affect all the students? And then I come to find out that Chaffey College had some of the highest book prices. And when we would do the buyback book program, our bookstore was making profit off of the students.
Damn.
When I found that, oh, it was on, bro. I did Mecha, led it with me giving them information, a march on the governing board. It was dope, bro. Like, it was dope. So all that just kind of was like, I was at the peak of my leadership and my education. And my first mentor that was a counselor, Ricardo Diaz, he tells me, what do you want to do with all this? And I'm like, I don't know. He goes, well, have you ever thought of transferring? And I'm like, well, what's that? What do you mean? Well, now you go to a four-year university and you get your degree. What do you think about that? And what I had remembered in 93 with those college students is they took me to the UCLA hunger strike when they were fighting for Chicano studies. So I said, and I was always a Bruin fan. I love UCLA Bruin football. So I said, well, maybe I could go to UCLA. And I remember Ricardo Diaz, I'll never forget. He goes, it's not maybe you could go to UCLA. If you work hard and make it your goal, you can go to UCLA, And that was the whole like, okay, well, let's follow the plan, and to get there. And then what I didn't know is one of his good colegas, Alfred Herrera, was this longtime Chicano outreach, specialist recruiting Latino students to UCLA. And him and Ricardo knew each other for years. So when I did my application and submitted it, he set up a meeting. Let me share this story really, really quick because I want to be mindful of time too. I want to be respectful. But I remember that UCLA was not coming to Chaffey College out in the Inland Empire. It was a bit out of their outreach range. It was too far. They thought UCR would be servicing Chaffey. But my Theo Rubin, rest in peace, was taking some photography classes at Chaffey at the time. And he saw a flyer saying UCLA is coming to campus. And he was watching me becoming like an activist and get all involved. So my Theo Rubin goes, hey, Johnny, UCLA is coming on this Wednesday or whatever. I'm going to sign up to meet with them, but you come over here and come with me. And then you talk to the guy. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm down. Because I didn't know where Westwood is at. I never even took my Corito all the way to LA. I didn't even know if it would make it, I was like, so we did that, bro. And I'll never forget. I walk in with my Theo and he tells Alfred Herrera, Mr. Herrera, do you mind if my nephew comes in with me? Because he wants to go to UCLA too. And he goes, sure. So they sit down and he asks my Theo, what do you want to study? He said, photo. He goes, but photo for creativity and like artistic expression? He said, yes. He goes, well, UCLA photo is really more towards journalism. So if you're going to do that, maybe you should go to Cal Arts, kind of started talking about what his options were. Dude, Othree, their conversation was no more than 10 minutes. And then Alfred Herrera goes, so your name is Johnny, right? What do you want to do? And I start telling him about Mecha and Chicano studies and everything. And he goes, oh, you know Ricardo. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. He's a colleague and all that. And then he goes, hey, do you mind waiting up after? Here's my card. I got to meet with some students, but I got something for you. It's in the trunk. Can you meet me and walk me to the car? Oh, yeah. So we wait for him. He gets done. We walk him to the car, bro. He pops his trunk and he gives me this badass UCLA pennant, bro. This blue and gold dope pennant, bro. And says, here, I want you to put this up. Like, we're going to get you to UCLA, bro.
Dang.
And I think I get a little sentimental because my deals passed on and, I lost him. He lost his battle with drug addiction and he passed in '09. And I don't know if I ever got a chance to really tell him that story. Like without my deal Ruben setting up that appointment, I don't know if I would have had that like direct connection, bro. So it goes back to the way I opened. I don't think that things happen for coincidence. I think they're all part of the plan, you know, and we just kind of, you know, move through. But yeah, so to say all that, like UCLA was something that I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was definitely going against the odds and shooting my like trying to get in there, you know.
What a what a story, man. Hey, destiny. That's what it was. Right? It was meant to happen, dog.
Sure was, bro. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and when I graduated, my Theo Ruben, man, he was so he had his camera, he's taking all the pictures at Raza grad. He was just like, I think it made him proud too that I went, and he knew that he was part of it, bro.
Man.
He knew that little meeting, you know, that went down, you know, that it was a big like it was a big connection because when I got the offer letter and I got accepted, then I was able to go to the admissions office and have my parents meet Alfred. And then next thing you know, I'm a work study student working at UCLA with Alfred, with all the outreach workers, doing all their filling their materials, answering phones. And I mean, it was a plug, bro. And I didn't even know it at the time. And all Alfred asked of us is when we were at UCLA is to now pay it forward. Go to these presentations, give campus tours, go into the high schools and do outreach and stuff. And I did all that work when I was an undergrad too. Yeah.
What was the timeline when you're at UCLA?
I was there from 96 to 99, 2000. Yeah. Yeah.
How was your experience at UCLA now that you're moving from over here, then you're going to
Yeah,
Westwood?
culture shock a little bit. Culture shock. I was a transfer student. I was a little older. The first year I got a chance to stay in the dorms, which was cool. Had my little roommate. He was just out of high school. It was a cool kid named Sergey Markamanov, and he was like a Russian, you know, little homie. But that fool watched like American Me, Bound by Honor. He used to
Yeah.
try to crease his pants and shit. And I would have workshops, dog, with the starch. I would hook them all
Oh,
up
that's
and
funny.
everything. How do you train your, how do you get your hair to lay down? I introduced to the not to the media way. You got to sleep with the media.
Yep.
And yeah. I was giving them game. You know, Chicanos and Russians, you are the same. Like Chicanos, Mexican, you guys do tequila, we do vodka. And it
Yeah.
was funny, bro. He was a good dude, but yeah, it was a culture shock. The workload, the writing, again, it jumped up. You know, being first gen, feeling a lot of the pressure now. I made it here. A lot of people are counting on me, you know, without knowing it. The drinking kind of increases, the smoking kind of increases, you know, but still kind of balancing it a little bit because I'm in Mecha still. Like I'm still kind of connected. They're my homies. But yeah, it was a little bit of a culture shock. Like I immediately picked up that even within my own gente, I was the ghetto one.
Mm.
Yeah, I was the ghetto one for sure. But what was also amazing was that there was also some homies too that were there. My homie Arnold, man, that we're still friends today with him and his family. You know, Arnold Arnaldo Vargas, that's a longtime photo teacher at Banning High School. He went back to his community and stuff. You know, with Arnold from Eastside Wilmas and the homie Juan from downtown from Pico Union. And we had our own little crew over there where like all these like wannabe bougie kid, you know, all these like, you know, gold star kind of kids were around us that, you know, and yeah, we didn't play no games, dog. Like best, you know, what is it? Fuck around and see what happens. Or like, yeah, yeah, you know, and but yeah, it was rough at that time too, because it was also the beginning of fraternity and sorority life was barely starting at that time. Now it's very integrated into college culture. And at that time, it was the beginning of it. So I mean, there was partying, but there was a lot of activism, and a lot of the partying scene was connected to giving back to our community. But I would say little by little, I started to see now that there was more of Latino fraternity sorority that were really just kind of focused on like just partying. And as a young student activist, that was very hard for me to swallow. I used to kind of really call them out and shit, you know, and just be like, you know, how can you just be here and act like everything's all good and we're in this campus that's so it's like Disneyland, and in our communities the shit's going down. And then in a way too, at that time, you know, my kind of, you know, my analysis was still a little bit immature, but I think there was some truth in it. Like, why do you want to party like the white boys? Why do you want to be like these Greek organizations? Why even participate in that? We should be creating our own shit, you know? And so yeah, sometimes that wouldn't make me a lot of popular with a lot of heads because I think I was always kind of strong in my politics, a bit militant too.
Mm.
You know, either you're down with this or down with that. And but I think it was that part of growing up too in your leadership. Like when you're fighting for justice and everything, it's hard to get a sense that there's two ways you can go about it. You could come hardcore and either say you're on my political line or you're not. And if you're not, get to step in, or you meet people where they're at and you build relationships with them and you educate them and you empower them and you figure out what their issues are. And if they have a sense of purpose and you build on that.
Mm.
That's organizing, that's mobilizing, that's educating in ethnic studies worlds, you know?
So what'd you major at UCLA?
History and Chicano studies.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you're at the Mecha at UCLA, or are you still
Yeah.
participating in Mecha back
I
home?
hung in with Metcha for about a year and a half, but they were very like, I don't know, they ran the organization very formally using a lot of Robert's rules and everything. It didn't feel like the familia that I had at community college. So then I started kicking it with these crazy artists that went to go visit Chiapas. They went in a delegation. And when they came back, they were on fire about mobilizing and being in community and doing art exhibits and making film and doing murals and doing poetry and all that. And, you know, because I'm over there in the drinking smoking program. Now we're getting kind of lit, but we're creating art.
Mm.
And I think what the artist homies have always vibed with me because I think I'm that balance of I have a little bit of that creative bug, but I'm also that organized. I'm also that leader. Like I can quickly start to put together what we need to make it happen.
For
And
sure.
my apartment, funny to say, ended up being a big kick it spot at UCLA too. You know,
I wouldn't doubt it.
yeah, a lot of the homies, like, you know, I think if you remember in Santa in the neighborhood, Elias Sierna,
Yeah.
Elias was a master's student. He already had his little son, Che. He was making films, and that fool would bring the projector, the wheel-to-wheel projector, and shoot his movies on the wall at my
Oh, that's
pad,
dope.
doing editing. And then my homie set that one time. He was like, fuck it, bro. He primered the wall and started working on a mural piece in my apartment. Like it was dope, bro. Like I that part of me, like being in that scene and recognizing that like we can do stuff using our creative intelligence to push back against the system, and the system won't even know what the hell's even going. Like the system needs to catch up to us
Yeah.
because they got so inspired by that the Zapatistas call to be autonomous. Why are we always looking to integrate ourselves into institutions when we can get together and develop collectives and do our own shit?
Mm.
And they came back hardcore, bro. So yeah, they become kind of my new family. But again, a lot of it was, you know, kind of partying and kind of like doing the thing. And then that's kind of like towards my UCLA end is the part of the harder part of my story was little by little, you know, a lot of things were kind of happening. I went through a big breakup, like my first kind of serious relationship, my college sweetheart. We have a fallout, you know, you know, for whatever reason, just being young, a bit immature, but you know, and this is not putting blame on her, whatever, because I want to think that she was young too, trying to figure it out. But at some point, I felt like I got cheated on, and I actually saw the dude, and it was just all these emotion, all this anger, and I didn't know about like meeting with a mentor to talk about my feelings. I didn't know there was no like círculo de hombres that I work with now and then to go to. And forget that in 99 or to the therapy? Like what? Like hell no, homie. Like my job is to put the oldies and get fucked up and sing and cry and everything all fucked up and then do it the next day. And do it the next day. And that started and then I will say that I still had a crew of homies back home and you know they were in the streets and those fools were like, you know, fucking around with harder drugs, you know, with meth in particular. And I got pulled into that life too and kind of like living this kind of one foot in this world and one foot out and at some point just getting lost, bro. And that unfortunately took about almost 4 or 5 years of my life a little bit was
Mm.
lost in that. I had my degree, you know, in a sense I had my degree, but I left an incomplete that then turned into an F and that they were holding a hold on my degree because I needed to make up that class. So as I'm leaving UCLA and everybody's asking, hey, didn't this fool just graduate from UCLA? Why is he all like fucked up, like running in the streets and doing all this crazy shit, looking all spun out? Like, what the fuck? Like, didn't he go to, and what I guess the dirty little secret was that F, that incomplete turned into an F, would stop me from getting my degree.
Mm,
And for me to get that lift off, I had to pay another quarter. And that would have been like 3,500. It was a lot of money to then pay. And I just, yeah, man, I mean, it was just a lot of stuff. Like what I know now in like youth development work, I'm 23 years old. And what we know in this work, like you're still trying to develop who you are, even though you're in your early 20s, and I think that and being lost and needing to still find my way, even being 23, 24, I think was why being at the Pico Center and their commitment to work with older youth, right? To work with our youth that are 14, but not just 24, but if your system impacted, we'll work with you even if you're 30.
mm,
Because I think we've all known that sometimes like you could be a certain age, but your inner child and the shit you go through, you're still trying to figure it out. And
mm.
so yeah, I had this opportunity that I think at the time I just got lost in, and really I think it was that transition of being a young man like into adulthood and into now finally being a teacher. That means being a professional and everything, and not even knowing, well, what does that look like? Like, how do I need to dress now? How do I need to talk? Like, how do I even interview for that? Like, I think in many ways, that whole years I was also kind of running because I didn't know what that looked like for me.
It's just because I think we just get caught up in the next moment because we have to do it at huevo. Like this is it,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and then the day comes and you're like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Y te pierdes. So, and this was the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, 99, 2000. Yeah. Yeah. So from about 99, so 2000 to 2000 in like my bad. I started at the Pico Center in 2004. So from 99, the partying gets out of control from 2000 so to about 2003. I luckily a homie hired me to be a labor organizer, and I was kind of traveling around, so that took me out of the neighborhood. It kind of got me with these homies that still partied crazy. They're still drinking Perico, they're doing their shit, but now I'm partying with Dominicans and Puertorriqueños. Like the union was rooted in the East Coast in the Mid-Atlantic region, so I got a chance to get pulled out of Cali, and next I'm running campaigns in Albany, New York, Delaware, Chicago, and South Chicago. When the Cabrini Greens and Robert Taylor's, the largest project, I was there. I saw that. Like, I mean, we traveled around, bro. Like New Mexico, like wherever there was industrial laundry workers and immigrant laundry workers, our team was there.
Ooh.
And I think it was really good for me to see, like, hey, you know what? Like, you're doing some good work and you're making an impact, but when are you going to finally use that degree and kind of build? After a while, it was traveling around was cool, but then sometimes you're like, you know what? It's time to build. And that's when I got blessed and I became sober when I was 28 years old. And then I started working at the Pico Center. And later on in that year, that fall, I started as a program coordinator.
I want to talk about the PY, but before the PY or in between your undergrad, when did your master's degree come in? Is that later?
Yeah, the master's degree actually comes after working from 2004 to 2008, 4 years at the youth center.
So 4 years at the youth center. How was that? Because I wasn't there. I was a little
Yeah,
kid during this
yeah.
time.
It was a trip. We were at the smaller location. They used to call it like the closet. It was a very kind of narrow, like you could walk in and it went deep, but it was really narrow. It was a trip though, Othree, like really at being 28 and kind of having a baby face and everything. It was hard working with the homies that were 24, 25. These buster ass fools would try to come in and try to get crazy on me, dog. I remember, and it's funny, I'm wearing all black and gray now. Yeah, because the neighborhood, right there. I remember one day I made the mistake of wearing a brown
Oh
shirt.
hell no.
And I know, bro. And they gave in a loving way. I remember the Gomez brothers, Junebug and Junior and Soldier and then Ricky. They were like, hey man, hey Johnny Rock, you're cool, man. Like we got, you're the home, but don't wear that shit around here. Like, Like, and be careful if you drive around like that. They're gonna look, people are gonna be looking, you know. Um, but yeah, I think it was like we were really at that time building the model. We had one of the first hip hop studios in Los Angeles in 2004. And we were really just learning what these workshops and what programming could be for the studio. And I was a part of like, we had those, we did have those framed paintings that are kind of like, the leaders that ground the organization, Rigoberta Manchu, Cesar Chavez, and Malcolm X. So I remember, I was the first one to gather us up. We're getting ready for a Cesar Chavez celebration. And Oscar, aka Olok, executive director, like, hey man, we need a track. We need to do a hip hop track dedicated to Cesar Chavez, bro. Like that's been like we need to do that. And I remember saying, okay, well, how are we gonna do this? And then he's like, well, do it like a program, do some workshops, like school the students, show them what's up. And that's when I was like, okay, boom. So, I get a little, DVD, little clips of showing some of the conditions of migrant farm workers and the struggle and a couple of his speeches. And then just hyped up the homies at the time to like, let's write a track talking about if Cesar Chavez was going to come to the center. And yeah, it was like, I think for me, it was the first time of like kind of saying that through hip hop, we're not only like getting them to be like artists and to want to like participate in hip hop culture, but we're also like kind of empowering them to use their voice to like raise awareness and to educate and kind of getting at the roots of hip hop, right? And
So,
it was
so just
dope.
quick question. You were so what was your role at the time?
I was at that time, I was the program manager. And then a little bit years when you started coming, I became the program director, which just meant a little bit more in pay and a little bit more of managing those programs. But I also used to have to help with the evaluation. Like I had to like write up these annual reports on my programs and stuff
So from 2004 to 2008, you're the program manager
full time. Yeah.
full time, and I'm guessing you're one of the people responsible for the beginning of the compilation albums, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that started. Uh-huh. Yeah, the West Coast All Stars and all that. Yeah, that was Oscar's title. But yeah, I was the first one charged with, okay, we have like basically these gente that go to Venice Boardwalk or whatever that are selling CDs and putting the music out there. We need to do the same.
Mm.
And then again, kind of this movement of gang intervention and violence prevention. We need to start putting our music together so that we can be part of that movement too and do some performances and like again kind of make it so that the homies instead of banging on the streets, let's see if we can get you to bang on wax.
Yeah,
And even there, let's start there, but then let's also get to you where you can start talking about topics and other things in your life too. You know, I've
yeah.
definitely seen that, brother. I've seen therapy happen. I've seen homies go in there and make some crazy ass tracks about their enemies and have them leave the studio and at least like their anger level and what they were going to do was here. And then after the studio doing the track, it comes down a bit. And at least they're high fiving and shit. I know it's negative, but they're high fiving like this shit, fuck, all the woofing. But that time they weren't driving around strapped up, ready to put in work.
Se calmaron
In the
in the
studio,
studio. Yeah,
and they were putting all that into the music. And, low key, we used to always be really nervous about the hard drive and some of the tracks that were there and try to make sure that
yeah.
those tracks never got leaked out on MySpace and
Mm.
that shit. And I think a few times these little sneaky fools did. And then of course Santa Monica PD, all this they would fuck with us. Wait, what are you using that studio for? Look at this on the MySpace or whatever. And we'd be like, hey, there isn't just the studio, Ernie G had a studio, it was just always like, you can't just put it on us.
Yeah,
Of course,
that's how it
technology
be.
is, and then laptops start coming in and the
Yeah.
mic. And then as we see into the later 2000s, like 08, 09, 010, a lot of students are just doing it on their own.
Yep.
Mhm.
I was I had the honor to be in the final three, four, five, and six, the compilation albums. But I was always curious about the first three, because
Yeah.
I that was before my time, or even the second and the first one, because when I came to the PY in 2012, like I think Volume 3 had just released. Not that, um, it
And
was
that
like
was the
a
one that Mnemonic did, right?
yeah. That's the one where all you fools are on the front of the cover. The
Yeah.
PY is a
Mnemonic.
P stub.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
PYFC
was
All Star Volume
that
3.
was like what we learned, like when we finally had Mnemonic's like ability to kind of brand, and a lot of that was Mnemonic, as a producer that also got mentored by some other folks in the industry too. Yeah.
And then you're doing this at the PY. When the well, first of all, when did you finish your undergrad because of that F?
Yeah, I went back when I went. That's how I got connected to Pico, the Pico Center, because I went back. I left the labor union, started my life back over again,
Okay.
found sobriety, and I'm going to UCLA because now I have that money for being a junior. I pay the fee, and
Okay.
now I'm taking this one class.
Mm,
And while I'm going to take that class, I run into the homie. Shout outs to Professor Jaime Cruz at Santa Monica College.
yeah.
The homie Rebel, Profe Cruz, sees me walking on campus because he was on campus. What's up, Johnny? Because when we connected, when I was in my undergrad, he had just been a victim of gun. He had just got shot, and he was at UCLA walking in a cane because he was a victim of gun violence. The incoming September, he had got like shot July and August, and he was starting school that September. He
Mhm.
had been accepted. So when I met him, he was still really fresh on who he could trust and everything. And we bonded quickly, and because of also the home. And then he would always want to come and kick it at my house too. He remembers those parties too. So he sees me. What's up, Johnny? What you been up to, man? It's been a few years. What's cracking? And I tell him a little bit of my story, and he goes, "Man, well, I'm glad that you put all that shit down." And he was telling me stories of how it's taken some of his homies, and they're all caught up, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna take you down to, we've got that youth center. You remember in '99 when we did that march and we built those crosses and we did all that thing for the homies?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we have a youth center now. So why
Mm.
don't you come out and check it out?" So I'm like, "All right." So Jaime took me down there, and Elias was there and Oscar was there. And that's how I got kind of like integrated in '04, was a visit where Oscar came in and said, "Hey, you want, check it out." And then I sat in the little like kind of area that was like our little kind of talking area with the couches, and the homies were all there. And they're like, "Well, who are you?" And everything. And so then Oscar's like, "Yeah, yeah, this guy, he wasn't even from the neighborhood, but he helped do the marches and everything." And then I just started talking to them, and I was making them laugh and everything. And then after, Oscar goes, "Hey, you want a job?" He's like, "We've had people come in here and they can't even get these youngsters to talk to them and like, are you down?" And then I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, "Yeah, I'm down. I'm
And that
down."
was it. And that was it.
Yeah. Now, yeah, the rest kind of that was like history in my journey. So yeah, yeah. So '04 comes, and then we start to work on that. Yeah, as our first project was that first album.
And then when the idea to get your master's degree come
So
into
it was
play.
part of the plan, was so now I'm there 4 years, and now it's like, how could we think about potentially elevating the center and our work? How many things of like where what we're doing at the youth center, we should be doing in our schools, like having a studio and having case management and like just creating a family like we did too, and leadership, the youth council and everything too. A lot of, I think, the values that align with ethnic studies work really, transformative education. So Oscar's like, "Look, I'd love to mentor you so that you could be the next executive director, where you could step in here. And the community, you've been adopted, like you've got connection, you could do it." But he goes, "I think you need a master's, because I have my master's, and there's a lot of way that I've been able to politic and justify some of my work because I have a master's."
Hmm.
He got his from the University of Texas in public administration. So I was like, "Well, what would I go back to school for?" And I'm like, "Well, what I've always loved and ever has always been Chicano studies. And Northridge has the largest department of Chicano studies in the US. So I applied, and I got in, and I wrote in my statement about how I wanted to go into Chicano studies to research youth programs, because at some point I wanted to create a community school there.
Hmm.
So I go, right, and I'm still volunteering. I'm still a mentor. I'm still working with the guys group. Shout outs to Big Lucky, to Steve Luciano. Whenever Oscar and them need me for organizing, they're still calling on me, but I'm not working there full time. But I'm still connected. I still go visit and everything. So I'm in my classes, and then I just start meeting these amazing, profesoras in particular, these activist scholars. Shout out to Dr. Juana Mora and Doctora Rosa Rivera Furumoto, um, and Dr. Teresa Montaño, that's leading a lot of ethnic studies efforts now. They were like, man, Johnny, like the work you're doing so amazing. These models, like with the curriculum you're building and everything. You need to do research and get a PhD so that then you could use that work to change policy. You can use that work so then you can say, these are the best practices. And we let other folks from community come out and do this work. Yeah, they might capture it a little bit, but they're not going to be able to speak on it and do it as a practitioner like you. You don't have any kids, you don't have a mortgage. Like, you're at this point where you're young enough, you should go after the doctorate. Go
Mm.
get that PhD. And we can tell you that being an activist scholar, you can also make an impact. Like, so all Othree, it just hit me, bro. I'm like I felt like it was just that next step in my life where I had this turning point where this opportunity was going to open. And again, part of it too was the plan was, hell yeah, Johnny Rockets, go get your PhD. And that's even going to help the school more, because you would have your doctorate and everything.
So at what point are you at Northridge? What time? What is the
Oh,
year?
that's 2008, 2009. And then I wrote my thesis in 2010. And then I went back to the center for 1 year full time from '09 to '09 to 10.
What was your thesis about?
Oh, my thesis was on the counter stories of the youth from the Pico Center.
Oh, that's dope.
I interviewed them to understand what the school to prison pipeline like impacts were, but mostly what was their school disengagement. Because one thing is to say that they're dropouts. That puts the blame on them.
Hmm.
But we didn't have the language yet of calling them school pushouts, that the system was pushing them out. But at that time when I was in school, we were calling it disengagement, meaning students are disengaging from school and they're learning for reasons. What are those reasons? And instead of having the data in their grades and their attendance tell a story, how come we're not asking these young people, what's going on in your life? What was your schooling experiences? And how did you end up at Olympic Continuation School? Or how did you end up at probationary school? How did you end up at the center? Tell me your story about school. And woo, I I use some of those stories to this day when I teach in my education department to pre-service teachers. Because the one thing that always stood out in that first set of interviews was asking this question: can you please tell me the first time that you kind of felt that you and school didn't get along? When you kind of like had a bad encounter with the teacher, or like with can you tell me that moment when you were kind of like F school? And it's basically like what scholars now call educational trauma. All the participants took me to that one moment when a teacher or principal told them that they weren't going to be shit and that they were a waste of time. And yeah, and one of them, shout outs to brother GA. I think Gabriel Avila, GA. I mean, his story will always stand out to me because he was one of those students that was in elementary school in third grade. He was doing those special, like the resource class where you get extra tutoring and stuff. So they used to call it RSP. So they would take you out of class, right? In front of your other peers. At some point, you go work with these extra tutors. He tells me the story that he's there in the class and the teacher goes, okay, all the RSP students, you need to go now and everything. And then a kid in the class goes, what does RSP stand for? And then another kid goes, real stupid people. Ah,
Damn.
ha, ha, ha. The whole class starts to laugh and the teacher starts to laugh. And no, 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 no. It means real special people. Ha 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 ha. And they took him out. And he said from that point on, he felt so ashamed and so put down that he started to hate to come to that class. He started to hate to even be around that teacher. And he said that was the first time where he would just like sit there and not want to do nothing. Like that kind of refusal, that like innate pushback was happening in third grade because of that experience, him made to feel ashamed, to feel dumb, you know. But they
And
shared a
you,
lot of those stories, bro. They shared a lot. And that was when I was like, the only way that we're really going to ever change this issue is whatever policy or programs that we're going to do, I need to do them with these students. We need these students to tell us how to create these intervention programs or how to create these learning environments that can take into account that they've been through some shit, you know? And they need a space which we now know is more of a safe space, and they need a space of connection and care, right? Like what Paulo Freire says is they need this humanizing space that doesn't see them just as a student first, but they see them as a person. I have a life outside of school and I've been through some shit. And the problem with the educational system is it isn't giving me the tools and empowering me to deal with my life or the conditions in my community. So what's the value? Why am I even going here? You know? And I learned a lot too, what the data said too, which was what the students told me too, is they started disengaging in 6th and 7th and 8th grade. They kind of quit going to school in 9th and 10th grade because of racist ass Santa Monica High School, you know, this rich, white, affluent school. Students of color, it's like, get out of there. They'd send them to Olympic, to the continuation. But what I learned from them was they kept on going to school for 2 things, their friends and free lunch. So they'd catch a meal.
Things that had nothing to do with school, dog.
At all.
At
No,
all.
no, at all. And so it was great, man. And then, you know, I took the recommendations and bring them up to Oscar and the board and everything. And the whole idea was to start a mentoring program. That was supposed to be the goal, was like, let's get on a grant and stuff. And I always knew it was hard, you know, you know, the center was so small staff and we were kind of at times taking on the world, you know. Shout outs to Selena and, you know, all the folks that came after me too, you know, were doing the good fight and building and everything too. But at some point, if you would talk to any of them, there's always a point where you do feel a little bit overwhelmed, you know, you feel at capacity, you know, but the work was being done, dude. We were building.
You get your master's degree. That sounds like a oh man. If I could read it, I don't know if you still have it.
Yeah,
And
I can send it to you. Yeah.
oh,
And what's firme is that you, oh, this is funny. This is like a profe. This is some like Chicano scholar shit. But if you go to Google Scholar and type in Johnny Carlos Ramirez, my dissertation will pop up. My master's thesis, the title, you're gonna love it, Othree. My title of my master's thesis is "Don't Point the Deficit Finger at Me, Fool." Chicana School Disengagement.
oh.
And I took that because one of the students in the interviews kind of said that. When I explained to them my research and I explained this whole deficit perspective, in a way, symbolically, it's like them putting the finger in your face. It's your fault. Like it's on you and everything. That's deficit. And he was like, yeah, it's like you want to say, don't put that deficit finger at me, fool. So yeah, that was the time. But if you look it up, it's there.
I will look it up. I would love to read it. Um, Interesting. I'm telling you, Johnny, I'm just learning so much. It's like I'm in school, right? Um, it just I never got my master's degree, but I've always wanted to ask other scholars and professors what their master's thesis
Mhm.
was about. I'm interested in reading these.
Yeah.
How long was it? How many pages?
Yeah, ooh, I know, dude. Like it should have stayed somewhere between 55 to 75, 80 pages because I did a lot of the interviews and stuff and ended up being 130.
I'll read 130 pages. Ain't no it's like
Oh,
reading
yeah,
a
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. No, we'll connect when we visit like in person and stuff. I actually have a couple of copies in the bounded.
Mm,
So I can loan you the bounded if you want to read it like that, or you can scroll and read it on Google. Yeah.
that'd be an interesting experience. But to continue on the timeline, uh you work a year at the PY, right? What was that like?
It was like a crazy transition because I was waiting on my PhD on the doctorate decision.
Mm,
So in that time, I was kind of like saying, if I don't get accepted to this PhD program and now I'm back at the center, then maybe I should take a couple more years. Let's build this school. Like let's do our thing. And then maybe, you know, I'll go back for the doctorate, you know? I wasn't still seeing completely the value in it, but I was like, well, I applied and I did a master's thesis, right? So I had like already published research. So I'm thinking, let's see where this goes. And then that year was dope because I felt like I was kind of handing it off to Selena and to some of the next generation of leaders. And that year was kind of dope because we were working with a new group of ninth graders and like these little crazy little artists, kind of like artsy, expressive cats that were working with Freddie. Shout out to Freddie Avila. That was like, on my team that did a lot of the digital media stuff. So, they would do these amazing projects and we'd have these skater little homies that would come and want to like talk about like, getting involved in the community and stuff. So I kind of felt that at that time, I did feel a little bit like a seasoned youth worker. I did feel about like, even though, yeah, for those 2 years that I was doing my master's, I wasn't there full time. But once I jumped back into being full time, I was clicking back again,
Mm,
like programs and everything too, and learning how to write the annual reports and all that stuff too. I was also trying to mentor, like what would it be to write a grant? And I would meet with the I forgot her name if it was Audrey or whatever, but the grant writer for the PY. I would meet with them and everything, and like, oh yeah, so I was always, I guess, if anything, trying to apply the things I was learning to community, you know.
for sure.
Mhm.
Well, look, Johnny, I would love to hear the rest of your story. I would love to split this interview into two parts.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll end the story here right now before you hit your PhD, and we'll talk about your professor days, and we'll get into other topics. But to end at least our first introductory plática, I have one question for you.
Yes.
If you could talk to the future Johnny Rocket, what would you ask him?
Oh my goodness. I would ask the future Johnny Rocket, um, how much did all the like learning and all the like knots and baggages that you've carried in your own life and then also working in community, right? Like all the struggles, how much did those experiences now give you a deepened sense of wisdom?
Mm,
Like for me, when I think about maybe future self, I think about like, because life's a struggle, you know what I'm saying? And I'm still learning, and we're building and we're still, not giving up the fight, and trying to take care of ourselves like while we do it. And my hope is that just all this is going to lead to things that will allow wisdom to be there so that it makes it feel worth it. Because once you have that wisdom, those become the gems that then you're going to be able to pass on. Because our community knows when folks are sharing wisdom. They feel the energy of it, they feel the essence of it. Sometimes, and what's beautiful is some of the best wisdom that I've ever gotten has been from our young people. So sometimes wisdom doesn't have to do with age.
yep.
It has to do about critical reflection and learning and trying to stay true to yourself and recognizing that this is a lifelong journey. So I would, by the future Johnny Rocket, I'd be like, man, like how much, what was this all worth the wisdom that you got at the end?
Mm. Yeah, that'll be a. I wish I'd be there if this conversation would ever happen. If it were to ever take place, I would love. I would. I imagine myself when I asked my guest this question. I was like, what if I'm there when this interaction happens? Like, I would love to see,
To have that
you know,
moment?
to have that
Yeah.
moment to see my guests and their future selves have a
Yeah.
conversation and just to be a witness because everybody has a different answer when I ask this question. And it's a beautiful answer. Thank you, Johnny. I know next time when we have our second plática, we'll pick up from 2012
Yeah.
to the present time because we didn't even talk about how we met.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about. I have a special story that I'm gonna save for the next
Okay.
plática. It could be the next one. It could be 10 from now. It could be 100 from now. It all depends on scheduling. I know you're busy and it's the holidays and Movida's got to be done and
Sure, sure, sure. But you let me know, carnal. I'm down. I'm down to support and thank you, brother, for like what I'm also seeing is like in this podcast, like in your platform, you are collecting these stories and these experiences and stuff. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to take this moment that maybe in the future we could revisit together
yeah,
and be like, remember in 2024 shit like this is
yeah.
what's going down. And yeah, to like have that moment to come full circle. And this experience and this platform is a way to do that.
I'm
Yeah.
a I'm a big supporter of documenting. not for the world, but for ourselves, for the future selves, for um the next generation. Like I'm about giving back, about
Yeah.
telling stories now that people in the future will know. Hopefully, they stumble upon our stories and they get that little gem. You know, they get those 30 seconds like Johnny changed my life when he was talking to Othree. Or maybe it leads for, another opportunity for you to go talk on a different podcast, and that changes somebody's life. And that's what it's all about. I'm a big supporter of documentation. Now this interview, this Platica is going to be on YouTube. Eventually it's going to be on Spotify and Apple Podcast, but it's going to be stored in a hard drive, and then we could look in 10 years, hopefully,
Yeah, that's
if
the
things work
archive,
out,
eh? Yeah, that's the
things,
community archive.
if
Yeah.
things work out, we'd be like, my boy Johnny was in the podcast. He was one of the first 30 guests, and he was talking about his story. And I just love listening to people's stories. I get to talk about my story all the time, but to give my peoples an opportunity to tell theirs is just as important. Because it's not just about me, it's about us, right?
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Othree. Well, thank you, my brother. And yeah, we'll set it up part 2.
Part two, we'll keep in contact, and yeah, we'll figure it out next steps. But other than that, any final words?
Oh no, just gratitude, carnal. Gracias, bro. And it was
Thank
great
you.
connecting. And again, let's meet offline, man. Let's break some bread, and even beyond the podcast, bro. I feel so good to now be back home.
Yeah,
To be now more local and to be able to reconnect and build for sure.
for sure. Well, thank you. Gracias. I know these pláticas, they take a long time sometimes, but they're worth it. They're worth it in the end.
Definitely, brother. Thank
Other
you.
than that, it's your boy Othree signing off. Don't forget to love yourself today, all right? Adios.
Peace.
Stepping out the door with some fresh 90s, the old whites, the drips nice. Yeah, I'm icy, but I don't wear eyes. Still a fool that looks fly. Got my button down on, let's get lost in the